Wrong table, wrong day, gentlemen. A single dad stood up for a stranger. Then his true identity was exposed. The Lamar restaurant shimmered with a golden glow beneath cascading crystal chandeliers. The soft murmur of conversations, accented by the elegant weave of violin music, filled the air. At a secluded corner table, 3 men in dark suits leaned in close, their presence a stark contrast to the woman in a beige coat whose eyes darted around, betraying a flicker of growing panic. The largest of the men pulled out an empty chair with a predatory razor-thin smile. "Let's have a private conversation," he suggested, his voice low. From the bar, a man in a simple work jacket, a single red thread wrapped around his left wrist, stepped forward. He placed a small, cracked porcelain spoon deliberately on the corner of their table. His voice was quiet, yet it cut through the room with an unnerving clarity. "Wrong table. Wrong day, gentlemen." The entire restaurant seemed to hold its collective breath for a suspended heartbeat. "Who the hell are you?" the big man snarled, his eyes narrowing. "A father," the stranger replied. "That's enough." He twisted the cracked spoon, catching the light, and in that instant everything shifted. Evan Hale at 35 was never supposed to be in places like this. His life was typically lived in the quiet spaces between other people's problems. A single dad, an industrial maintenance technician, the guy who came in after hours to fix commercial kitchen equipment, recalibrate gas sensors, or repair automatic doors in restaurants and hotels when they inevitably broke down. His work made him largely invisible. His 7-year-old daughter, Lily, had a morning ritual that was his anchor. Each day she'd fold a paper crane and tuck it into his work jacket pocket. "For safe travels, Daddy." Then she'd tie a red thread around his wrist, a soft cotton reminder. "So you remember to breathe slow when things get scary." The thread was there now, a gentle pressure against his pulse, as he stood in Lamar's opulent golden glow, a clipboard full of maintenance orders in his hand. 3 years ago, his wife Sarah had died in a boarding house fire. Cheap wiring, non-existent sprinklers, a real estate company that had callously sacrificed safety for profit, squeezing every last cent from desperate tenants. Since then, Evan saw danger in every overlooked detail. Tonight, he'd brought Lily along to finalize the next morning's kitchen repair schedule. She was engrossed at a table near the emergency exit, folding cranes from napkins while he discussed paperwork with the night manager. That's when his trained eye began to pick apart the room. The sprinkler head near the flambe station was thick with grease buildup. The emergency exit door caught and jammed when he subtly tried to close it. He could hear the grinding mechanism from 20 feet away. Automatically, Evan snapped photos with his phone, a habit that had saved his clients from countless health department fines. "Maintenance areas through the back," the maitre d' said, eyeing Evan's oil-stained jacket with thinly veiled disdain. "The bar is for paying customers." Evan nodded, accustomed to the dismissive treatment, the way people in $1,000 suits viewed him as part of the furniture, background noise. He was used to being invisible. But as he reviewed his notes, something else caught his attention, something that had nothing to do with kitchen equipment. The 3 men in black suits had subtly repositioned themselves around the woman at table 12. They'd chosen their seats with deliberate precision, effectively blocking the overhead security camera's view. The largest man wore a wireless earpiece on one side only, and his left sleeve bulged with the unmistakable outline of something that was definitely not a phone. The woman in the beige coat looked around nervously, her hands pressed flat on the table as if poised for flight. Evan had spent years reading body language from a different lifetime before Sarah died, before he chose a quieter existence fixing broken things instead of broken situations. But some instincts he knew never truly faded. He watched the men exchange quick, subtle glances, saw the almost imperceptible hand signals, noticed how they'd positioned themselves to cut off every potential escape route. The woman, he realized, was not there by choice. He glanced back at Lily, still absorbed in her origami. She looked up and met his gaze, pressing both palms against the table. Their silent signal meaning, "I'm watching you, Daddy." He slipped the cracked porcelain spoon from the bar set up into his palm, a nervous habit from the old days, something to fidget with, something to focus on when situations demanded absolute calm. The woman at table 12 looked desperately around, seeking help that wasn't coming. The restaurant hummed with polite conversation and the gentle clinking of silverware, violin music drifting from hidden speakers. Everyone seemed lost in their own worlds, minds on their plates oblivious. Everyone, that is, except Evan. He stood up, the red thread around his wrist a tangible anchor, and walked toward table 12. She doesn't want to talk, Evan said quietly, stepping between the woman and the largest man. Back off, the big man laughed, a harsh sound like grinding glass. Who are you in this fancy place? He gestured derisively at Evan's work clothes, drawing snickers from his companions. Several nearby diners looked up, smirking at the obvious class difference. I don't know them, the woman said, her voice a barely audible tremor. Her name tag almost hidden under her coat, read in Lynn. Evan used the cracked spoon as a subtle mirror, angling it to catch the reflection behind him. The third man had quietly moved to block the secondary exit near the restrooms. They had her completely surrounded. The restaurant manager materialized at Evan's shoulder, his smile strained. Sir, please maintain decorum. These are VIP guests enjoying their meal. Something was wrong about the manager. His watch was on the wrong wrist, recently switched, judging by the faint tan line. Fresh ink stains on his cuff suggested he'd just signed something. Someone, Evan deduced, had gotten to him. VIP guests who block camera angles and position themselves at exit points? Evan kept his voice level, but loud enough for other tables to hear. A woman at an adjacent table already had her phone out, live streaming. Oh my God, she whispered to her followers. Some maintenance guy thinks he's a hero. Nervous laughter rippled through the dining room. Someone called out, leave them alone, bro. The big man stood up, placing a heavy hand on Evan's shoulder. Smart guys know when to walk away. Evan shifted his weight, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement that relocated the pressure point of the man's grip. Not aggressive, just repositioning. The red thread around his wrist caught the light as he breathed slowly, just as Lily had taught him. The lady said she doesn't know you, Evan repeated, his voice now carrying further. The cameras you're blocking would back that up. Cameras? The man's grip tightened. What cameras? Evan nodded toward the ceiling. Overhead security. You've got it covered from your seating arrangement. Professional positioning. He let that sink in. Makes people wonder what kind of conversation needs that level of privacy. The live streaming woman zoomed in with her phone. Her follower count was climbing rapidly. This is escalating, someone murmured. The woman, Lynn, looked directly at Evan, and something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. Are you? Did you work with Grayline? Evan's hand went still on the spoon. That was a name he hadn't heard in years. Grayline. The big man's attention sharpened. What the hell is Grayline? But the seed was planted. The woman knew something about Evan's past, and now everyone was listening. I'm nobody special, Evan said. Just someone who fixes things when they're broken. The manager tried to intervene again. Perhaps we could move this discussion. No. The big man snapped his fingers, and his companions moved in closer. We're finishing this conversation right here. One of them reached for Lynn's purse. She pulled it back instinctively. Give us what we came for, the big man said, his voice dropping to a low growl. Make this easy. I don't have anything, she protested. USB drive. Documents. Everything you took from the Ravenfield files. Evan's blood ran cold. Ravenfield. The real estate company that owned the boarding house where Sarah died. The company that cut corners, bought off inspectors, and let tenants burn for profit margins. This wasn't a random shakedown. This was connected to something much, much bigger. The live stream was picking up viewers rapidly. Comments flooded the screen. Call the cops. This is insane. That maintenance guy is about to get destroyed. Ma'am, Evan said to Lynn, never taking his eyes off the men. What kind of documents? Financial records, she whispered. Safety violations. Bribery trails. I'm a journalist. The pieces clicked into place. She wasn't a random victim. She was investigative prey. And these weren't random thugs. They were corporate fixers. You're making this harder than it needs to be, the big man said to Evan. Walk away. Fix your pipes. Leave the grown-up problems to grown-ups. The dining room had fallen silent, save for the violin music and the whispered commentary from the live stream. 30 people watched, waiting to see if the working-class hero would back down or be crushed. Evan looked over at Lily, still folding paper cranes at her table near the exit. She caught his eye and touched her chest, their signal for breathe deep, stay calm. He rolled the cracked spoon between his fingers, feeling the hairline fracture that ran along its surface. Fragile things, he knew, could still be useful if you knew how to hold them properly. Here's what's going to happen, Evan said, his voice carrying the quiet authority he thought he'd left behind years ago. The lady is going to walk to the bar. You're going to stay seated. And we're going to wait for the police to sort out who belongs where. The big man's smile widened. The police? You called the police. Not yet, Evan said. He pulled out his phone, set it to speaker and dialed 911. But I'm about to. That's when everything went sideways. The big man lunged forward. His companions moved to grab Lynn. And Evan realized that all his careful de-escalation had just run headfirst into people who never intended to de-escalate. The cracked spoon in his hand suddenly felt like the most important tool he'd ever held. The live stream viewer count hit 4 digits and climbed. Across the room, Lily pressed both palms against her table, watching her father step into the kind of fight he'd sworn he'd never have again. The first move came fast. The big man's hand shot toward Evan's throat, a classic intimidation grab meant to end things quickly and loudly. But Evan wasn't there anymore. He'd shifted his weight to the balls of his feet, the red thread around his wrist reminding him to breathe as muscle memory from another life kicked in. The cracked porcelain spoon became an extension of his hand. The sharp edge of the spoon caught the man's wrist at the exact pressure point between the radius and ulnar bones, not hard enough to break anything, just enough to make his hand go completely numb and fall uselessly to his side. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. The second man lunged for Lynn, but Evan was already moving. He snatched a cloth napkin from the nearest table setting, twisted it into a rope, and looped it around the man's reaching arm in one fluid motion. A gentle pull forward, a step to the side, and the man found his wrist zip-tied to the chair leg, the napkin acting like surprisingly effective soft restraints. The live stream exploded with comments, the viewer count climbing past 10,000. What the hell is happening? This guy knows martial arts. Is this real? The third man had been reaching into his jacket, but Evan was faster. He snatched the thermal receipt paper from the nearest payment terminal, the long curling kind that restaurants always printed too much of, and in 3 quick movements, had bound the man's thumb to his index finger with surprising effectiveness. Paying compliance, Evan said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. Apply pressure here, and you can control the whole hand. The technique was textbook nonviolent restraint. Maximum control with minimum force, exactly the kind of training that... Oh my God! Lynn stared at him wide-eyed. You're Evan Hale. You're the Evan Hale from the Gray Line Diplomatic Security Program. The dining room went dead silent, except for the violin music, which suddenly seemed absurdly cheerful. Gray Line. A diner at table 6 leaned forward. The company that trains embassy security? Not just embassy security, Lynn said, her journalistic instincts taking over. Evan Hale wrote the Calm First training manual, the de-escalation techniques for high-risk diplomatic situations. He was the head instructor for nonviolent conflict resolution. Phones came out across the restaurant. The live stream viewer count hit 20,000. The big man, still shaking feeling back into his numb hand, looked at Evan with new understanding. You're the guy who disappeared after that boarding house fire. The one in Chinatown? Evan's jaw tightened. That's not relevant here. Isn't it? Lynn pulled a USB drive from her purse, holding it up for the cameras to see. Because that boarding house was owned by Ravenfield Holdings, the same company whose safety violations I've been investigating. The same company that sent these men to silence me. The room erupted in whispers. The pieces were clicking together for everyone watching. Your wife, Lynn continued gently. Sarah Hale. She died in that fire because Ravenfield cut corners on fire safety systems. And you disappeared from Gray Line the day after her funeral. Evan's hand found the red thread on his wrist, Lily's reminder to breathe. Across the room, his daughter had stopped folding cranes and was watching with the kind of serious expression that 7-year-olds got when they realized adults were talking about important, scary things. I stopped training people to fight, Evan said simply. I wanted to fix things instead of breaking them. But you never stopped being good at it, the big man grunted, still massaging his wrist. The manager, who'd been trying to fade into the background, made a move toward the kitchen. Evan's voice stopped him cold. Manager, stay where you are. He held up his phone, still connected to 911. The police dispatcher has been listening to this entire conversation. They're about 3 minutes out. How did you? I never hung up. Evan showed the phone screen. Call duration 8 minutes 43 seconds. Everything's been recorded. The thermal receipt paper around the third man's thumb was cutting off circulation. He was starting to panic. I can't feel my hand. Then sit still, Evan advised. The technique is designed to be reversible without permanent damage, but only if you don't fight it. And Lynn stood up slowly, still clutching the USB drive. This contains financial records proving that Ravenfield has been bribing city inspectors for over a decade. Fire safety violations, electrical code violations, housing standard violations. They've been running slums and calling them affordable housing, including the boarding house where my wife died, Evan said, his voice carrying to every corner of the restaurant. The live stream comments were going insane. This is better than Netflix. Real-life vigilante justice. Someone needs to save this video. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. The big man made one last desperate play. You think this ends anything? You think Ravenfield cares about one dead maintenance worker's wife? That was the wrong thing to say. The red thread snapped as Evan's hand closed into a fist. The cracked spoon caught the overhead lighting, splitting it into sharp fragments across his knuckles. For one terrifying moment, everyone in the restaurant thought they were about to witness something that would get Evan arrested alongside the men who threatened Lynn. Instead, he opened his hand and let the broken spoon fall to the table with a soft clink. The difference between us, Evan said quietly, is that I know when to stop. The police burst through the front entrance just as the second man finally managed to untangle himself from the napkin restraints. Too late. 3 officers, tasers drawn, took in the scene. 3 men in various states of restraint, 1 woman holding evidence, 1 maintenance worker standing calmly in the middle, and about 30 diners with their phones out, recording everything. Someone want to explain what's happening here? The lead officer asked. Lynn held up the USB drive. I'm Nadia Lynn, investigative journalist for Metro Weekly. These men were attempting to steal documents related to an ongoing investigation into Ravenfield Holdings. This is Evan Hale. He prevented what would have been assault and theft of evidence. The officer's eyebrows went up. Evan Hale? The Gray Line instructor. Former instructor, Evan corrected. Current father. From across the room, Lily's clear voice rang out. That's my daddy. And somehow that was the moment that made everyone in the restaurant start clapping. The video went supernova. Wrong Table, Wrong Day became the most watched social media clip of the week. 24 hours after the incident, it had 40 million views across all platforms. The moment where Evan's red thread snapped, caught in perfect slow motion by 3 different phone cameras, became an instant meme. The comment section was ruthless. When you threaten a woman and accidentally wake up John Wick's accountant. Plot twist. The maintenance guy maintained your asses in place. Ravenfield Holdings stock price right now. Down, down, down. Evan's phone hadn't stopped ringing. CNN, BBC, local news stations, late-night talk shows. Everyone wanted the calm-first dad who'd taken down corporate thugs with kitchen supplies. He declined every interview. Daddy Jimmy Fallon's people called again. Lily announced over breakfast, sliding him a paper crane made from the morning newspaper's business section. They want to fly us to New York. What did you tell them? Evan asked, stirring his coffee. That you're not a TV person. You're a fixing things person. Smart kid. Smarter than the media circus camped outside their apartment building. The real aftermath was quieter, but far more satisfying. Nadia Lynn's expose on Ravenfield Holdings triggered a federal investigation. The USB drive she'd risked her life to protect contained evidence of a decade-long bribery scheme involving city inspectors, fire marshals, and housing officials. 17 people were indicted, including the Lamar manager, whose signed confession detailed how Ravenfield's fixers had paid him to look the other way, and provide private dining space for business discussions. The three men from the restaurant faced charges ranging from intimidation to conspiracy. The big man, Marcus Webb, a former cop turned corporate security, rolled on his employers within 48 hours of his arrest. But the real revenge came in smaller moments. Lamar's Yelp reviews crashed overnight. Atmosphere 2 out of 5. Management allows assault. Would not recommend for dates unless you enjoy dinner theater involving federal crimes. The restaurant's parent company issued a groveling apology and fired half the management staff. They installed panic buttons at every table and hired new security specifically trained in de-escalation techniques. The irony wasn't lost on Evan. The boarding house where Sarah died was condemned and torn down within the month. The city used emergency powers to seize the property, citing immediate safety hazards. A small memorial garden was planned for the site, funded by the settlement money from Ravenfield's bankruptcy. Evan stood at the construction fence, watching the bulldozers work, Lily beside him, her hand warm in his. "Is Mommy's place going to be pretty now?" she asked. "Yeah, sweetheart," he said softly. "It's going to be safe and pretty." Job offers started coming in the second week. Corporate security firms, private investigation agencies, diplomatic services. All wanted to hire the viral hero who'd neutralized 3 men with restaurant supplies. David Park from Meridian Security offered him a 6-figure salary plus benefits. "Your techniques are exactly what high-end clients need," Park explained. "Nonviolent, media-friendly, completely defensible." "Can I work part-time?" Evan asked. "I need to pick my daughter up from school." Park blinked. In his world, career came before family always. "We could discuss flexible arrangements." Flexible meaning I'm home by 3:30 every day. No weekends, no travel longer than 8 hours, Evan specified. "That's very specific." "That's my life." Evan took a consulting contract instead. Part-time safety assessment and de-escalation training for restaurants and hotels. Good pay, flexible hours, and work that actually mattered. His first client was Lamar itself. The irony resonated with everyone when Evan walked back into the golden dining room 3 weeks later, clipboard in hand, a red thread around his wrist, to conduct a comprehensive security audit. The new manager, a nervous woman named Patricia who'd been promoted from assistant, met him at the door with obvious anxiety. "Mr. Hale, thank you for coming. We know this must be strange." "It's just work," Evan said gently. "Let's make this place safer." They did. Emergency exits were cleared and tested. Panic buttons were installed. Staff training included recognizing signs of customer distress. Security cameras were repositioned to eliminate blind spots. Most importantly, they implemented the Calm First protocol. Any situation involving customer safety took priority over VIP comfort or revenue considerations. The changes worked. Within a month, Lamar had not only recovered its reputation but enhanced it. The restaurant where heroes are born became part of their unofficial marketing. The real victory came on a Tuesday evening when Evan was finishing his follow-up inspection. A young server approached him nervously. "Mr. Hale, there's a situation at table 9. A man won't stop bothering a woman who's dining alone. She's asked him to leave her alone, but he won't listen." Evan looked across the restaurant. Different men, different women, same dynamics. "What's the protocol?" he asked the server. "Calm first," she replied, her voice steady now. "I notify management, activate the panic button, and document everything while maintaining customer safety." "Perfect. Do it." The server handled it flawlessly. The man was removed quietly by security. The woman finished her meal in peace. No drama, no viral videos, no federal investigations. Just quiet professionalism making the world a little bit safer. Evan packed up his equipment and headed home. Lily was waiting with homework and paper cranes, ready to hear about Daddy's day fixing things. The red thread around his wrist had been replaced. The original had snapped during the confrontation 3 weeks ago. But Lily had tied a new one that morning, soft cotton against his pulse, a reminder to breathe slowly when the world got complicated. Some things were worth keeping broken. Others deserved to be fixed properly. The difference was knowing which was which. 6 weeks later, the federal courthouse steps buzzed with reporters and camera crews. Nadia Lynn stood at the podium beside the U.S. attorney, announcing the final indictments in the Ravenfield Holdings case. Conspiracy, bribery, criminal negligence resulting in death. The executives who built an empire on unsafe housing would spend the next decade in federal prison. Evan wasn't there for the speeches. He sat in the back row of the press gallery, Lily beside him, both dressed simply. They'd come not for the media circus, but for the moment that mattered. When it was time for statements, Nadia called him to the podium. Instead of speaking, Evan did something that would be remembered longer than any of the day's official announcements. He untied the red thread from his wrist, the new one Lily had given him that morning, and wrapped it gently around the evidence USB drive that had started everything. Then he placed one of Lily's paper cranes on top, the white origami stalk against the black plastic. The symbolism was unmistakable. Gentle protection wrapped around hard truth, with hope perched on top. The press gallery fell completely silent. Camera shutters whispered like prayers. Evan stepped back without saying a word. Lily took his hand. "My daddy doesn't need to talk," she said into the microphone, her 7-year-old voice carrying clearly through the marble chamber. He already said everything with his hands. The image, red thread, white crane, black USB drive, became the defining photo of the entire case. It spread across social media with captions like "Calm first," "Truth always," and "When heroes don't need words." Back home that evening, Evan tucked Lily into bed and found her latest origami creation on his nightstand. This crane was different, folded from the front page of the newspaper, the one with their photo on it. "For tomorrow, Daddy," she whispered sleepily, "in case you need to fix something else." Evan smiled and slipped the crane into his work jacket pocket. The red thread around his wrist caught the hallway light as he turned off her lamp. Tomorrow would bring more maintenance calls, more broken things needing patient repair. Heating systems and door sensors and safety equipment that kept people safe in ways they'd never notice. But tonight he'd helped fix something bigger than kitchen equipment. He'd helped fix the idea that powerful people could hurt others without consequences. Some repairs took toolboxes. Others just took courage, timing, and the willingness to say "wrong table, wrong day" when it mattered most. Truth, properly handled, never stayed buried long. And sometimes the most important maintenance was done by people nobody expected to be heroes. Which moment gave you chills? When Evan said "wrong table, wrong day"? Or when Lily's paper crane was placed on the evidence? Drop your thoughts below and hit subscribe for more stories where ordinary people do extraordinary things.